So I'm sorry about this. I went to Gen Con and thought I would have time to edit this, and I did not. So enjoy the Halflings episode. We recorded it like 3 weeks ago. I just haven't had a chance to sit down and edit it. Next week is Orcs, and after that we have Lizardmen with Remlays. But please do enjoy this. And again, I am sorry it took so long to get out. I'm going to stop rambling and start rambling, I guess. Or at least the present me is going to stop rambling, and the past me is going to start rambling. 3, 2, 1.
Hi,
Hello,
recording.
everyone. How's
Hello.
everybody doing? We are here again. We just talked about Norska. The video came out today. It took a little longer than expected because, I'm gonna be honest with you, an hour and 40 minutes is a lot of things to go through and do edits for, but we got it done. By God.
Well, and I love and Fee. I was from the early versions. You're like, oh, we can't do video. I'm like, Fee, doing a video would be easy, but you're like, no, just have our faces, and you're like, no, I can't do that. I'm like, okay, fine, more
Show the
work.
audience what we're talking about.
Fair. That's a good point.
Anyway, how have you been this week, How
So
have you been this week, Ginger?
I've had an interesting week. My week started technically on Monday, where I had to take my mom to get her tooth extracted because she had an infected tooth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and though what was annoying about the day one of the things about me is I like to have schedule, I like consistency, and I was like, all right, I was gonna get my morning, I was gonna do a whole bunch of things, and then the dentist calls and says, oh, we can go get this early, and I'm like, which is good, but I'm like, God damn it, that kind of like wrecks my morning anyways, because I'm trying to get back into the habit of exercise and going for daily walks because when I got COVID, that went out the window. And then just the past few days has just been helping my mom recover with that. The only other real thing of note that happened this week was I got my Steam Deck in the mail.
Oh, congrats.
Yeah, I got it was in the Steam sale. And I'm like, you know what? I have a little bit of money squared away. Now, I will preface it with I got the 64 gigabyte bare bones one. And I will not turn this into a Scott rants and Scott gushes over the Steam Deck. I will just summarize it in brief of like, I love this thing. It is not perfect, but man, do I love it. I love, first of all, that like Valve is very right to repair. You don't need like with a Switch, because if any of you've ever tried to take apart anything with Nintendo, you have to have a special drill bit, which you can get from certain websites like iFixit, not sponsored, but please sponsor but you can take it apart with regular Phillips heads, and Valve themselves even released the video saying you really shouldn't do this, but if you're going to do this, here's how you do it, which has major dad energy, and I love it. And it wasn't something they just slapped their name on. Like if you hold a Steam Deck and use it, you feel that Valve made this, and I love it. And I've even, as we speak right now, there's a distro of Linux called Batocera, which basically it's a video game emulator. I'm playing Pokemon Fire Red on it right now because so I love the thing. And guess what? It has one of the best features. It has a headphone jack. Yeah, that's literally kind of been my week. Has been enjoying my Steam Deck and like one night I was up till like 1 in the morning being like, oh, I could put all of these ROMs on it, and here we
Oh
go.
God! So you have a new toy.
Oh, I have a great new toy because I'm going to be on the boat. I'm like, I can't bring my desktop with me. But
I
yes,
mean,
it's a
you
fun
could.
toy
It's
that
just
I
a
love.
bad idea because if
It's a bad idea.
if there's any leakage or Lord forbid you end up like that cruise that had the sewage system back up.
Yeah,
Yo.
that would suck. Now yeah, it's called it was called it's nicknamed the Poop Cruise. Thankfully, one of the nice things about my ship, Pride of America, we are in port every single day. So even if we do have technically a problem of that magnitude, we are not very far away. It is the equivalent of breaking down on the major highway. So yeah, you're going to be inconvenienced, but getting a tow truck won't take too long.
Um.
Yeah, but that's been my week. Has literally been playing with my Steam Deck. And
So
that's it.
I
What about
am
your
at
week?
a friend's house recording this right now. He has been a lovely, wonderful host and a very, very, very good person to me while I've been here. You can say hi, Adagio.
Hello.
um, because we still don't have internet at my actual house. It's been 2 weeks. Something is horrifically wrong with the infrastructure because it's not just us without internet. It's an entire uh, an entire 2 mile by 2 mile grid. It's just down. The whole thing's
Okay, so it wasn't
like they
it
found
wasn't
the guy
like
stealing from us and got it turned back on, and then something happened in the storm, and the whole grid that we are on is just gone.
okay. My original theory was it was just those two numbskulls, but I guess that theory's been blown out the
Yeah,
water. Although, oh, funny story. Actually, you reminded me. This is a quick one. Literally earlier this week, one of the days, my mom. For those that don't know, my mom's a social worker, and she sees clients online. Some of them, not all of them, anyways. And just suddenly the internet went down. I do the usual thing you're supposed to do with a router: turn it off, turn it back on again. Did that several times, didn't work. Thankfully, long story short, we have a second internet, so I was able to just get her back up and running. And I was just like, man, I even like called the place. I'm like, yo, what's going on? And nothing. Found out apparently when someone was doing some like maintenance or splitting, they actually accidentally cut the wrong wire, and then there was even more to it. So yeah, I feel you.
so that's the thing. So I'm at his house. I got 50 kilometers done today. Like I missed the first 2 days of the week, so I was thinking, okay, I'm only gonna get to exercise 3 days this week. No, I got to exercise 5 days this week. I got 50 kilometers done walking with 200-meter dashes on 5 different days. I am proud of myself. I am back
Nice.
to actual exercise. Here's hoping it starts resulting in weight loss in the next week, and I can just maintain 50 to 60 kilometers every week. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I've been able to, again, because I've been just recovering COVID, I've been constantly going for walks outside, like, starting it and then just each day slowly like ramping up the distance. So, yay, healthy
everybody here
lifestyle.
for Warhammer, we're getting to that. But again, we got to do our appetizer before we get to our meat and potatoes.
I'm done. I'm
Have
done
you
with my
seen Have
week.
you seen any media this week?
I think your week is long, anyways. Oh man. The thing is, most of my media has been I can even look through my YouTube. Technically, I re-listened to when you premiered today's
Podcast.
um yeah, because I needed to refresh myself, and I was like, oh yeah, all of that batshit shenanigans. Um Watched a couple of videos on like Blender, which for those who don't know, Blender's a 3D open source software. Just and like without going into too much tech details, like I watched a really cool video that explained how you could layer animation. So like without using this tool, I even spaced on the name of it, but basically you could figure out how to like, for example, make a character walk. And then if you also wanted to make them wave at the same time, you would have to bury it, but then it kind of became this tangled mess. And basically what this tool does in it, it treats it like a video editor. So you can have one layer and then another layer. So if you want, for example, the walk cycle to go longer and you want the waving animation to go shorter, you can do that
Mm-hmm.
really easily without messing up the other ones. So yeah, what about you, Fee? Because everything else is just like literally looking through my YouTube history, and most of it is just VTubers and like um videos of like vintage planes taking off from airports. So I got not much more really like, ooh, here's an
I
interesting piece of media
I
beyond
I
what I've already
finished The
discussed.
Boys season 4. My wife's gonna kill me because I'm ahead of her, but that's okay. I'll
Hmm.
rewatch it with her and not spoil anything. I'm not spoiling anything here either. Um, but goddamn. And also to the people online being like, "Oh, this is so contrived," or no, honey, we've been leading up to this since season 1, and I knew it. All right, honey. We all knew that was going to happen. And this is definitely, like, I've read the comic version. The comics are a mess. They have some good parts, but overall, the comics suck.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah, I even saw like a video, like parts of it. it said, oh, I forget who did it. It basically said, yeah, that basically admits,
And
yeah, the comics are a mess.
and someone's like, oh, it's the all the good writers left with it. I'm like, honey, the original writer, the original head writer, is now the lead director and has been the executive producer of the project since the start. No, the good writer didn't leave. His apprentice is the one who took over most of the writing. It's the same people writing it since season one. Like, they're trying to make any excuse they can. And I'm just like, the same person wrote this.
Yeah, oh man, oh, I want where people just
Yeah,
blame bad this
and
or
you're
bad
just
whatever.
like,
It's just
no,
like,
no.
yeah, it's like no,
So
do your goddamn research. Like I'll perfect example. I'll admit I had a statement saying, "Oh, all the Craig movies are all like dark and brooding," and I've been listening to Kill James Bond, and apparently it that Craig Bond, from what I can tell from because I've only watched Casino Royale, that all the Craig ones are the old Bond movies just with a dark filter. It's still Bond, like I see woman, I must have sex. Which I'm like, and he then gets gadgets. Then he even in one of them, spoilers for Skyfall, he gets the Aston Martin from Goldfinger. So like they did this great stance of like, yeah, what do you want? An exploding pen? And it's like, okay, fine. I disagree with it, but at least you're going in a direction. And then they immediately like backtracked in the next movie. So like, what was the point? Anyways,
uh yeah.
let's get on to let's get. You got
Um
anything else, or shall we
I
get
don't
into
have
the
anything else
craziness?
right now. So we're gonna get into the craziness. Hey, it only took 11 minutes this time. It only took 11 minutes. Awesome. So I'm gonna read for you the quote that made it to the wiki for Halflings. And the cool thing about this week, I only had to read one book. I only had to read one actual novel to get all of the information out there is about halflings that isn't in an army codex or a rule book or online. When Mother Raya made the peoples,
Okay.
she measured out some things. To the dwarf she gave long beards, the halflings got the chins. To the dwarf she gave scowlings, the halfling got grins. To the dwarf she gave virtues, and the halfling got sins. I'm talking about halflings. You guys asked for this. Um, so this is a
Hold on, though. Pause, because this is what you just said. Last week, your quote saying the wholesome race. Why are they given sin
trust me.
if they're the
We're
wholesome
gonna get into
race?
this. I need you to understand and prepare yourself. Some of this is just the halflings are halflings. Okay, they are the wholesome race, but I need to assure you that wholesome and Warhammer are very very weird bedfellows.
So this is the equivalent of incredibly kinky sex, then followed by some of the
Yes.
best aftercare you'll ever receive.
All right.
All
So
right, let's go.
halflings. Um, it's the halflings episode, y'all. You all asked for this. Again, this is a comment-driven podcast. If someone puts in our comments, I want to see this. That's what we're doing. You need to tell me a week in advance, and we're gonna do it. So, that is pretty much. This is pretty much all of what we know of them. This entire podcast, I'm gonna go over every single thing we know of them, verbatim. And I'm going to start with halflings have been around so long they claim to have ancestors who slept with Sigmar himself and shook his hand. This seems highly unlikely in that both halflings have probably not existed that long, and also Sigmar didn't sleep with anybody that we know of.
Oh, so with that, I'm assuming again this is one of those. I forget there's a term of it when you try and apply a modern like philosophy to an older one. Is for argument's sake, was Sigmar
Uh,
then asexual? Question
we
mark.
know that Sigmar was probably attracted to women. We also know that Sigmar, I don't believe, ever took a queen. So that's why they have the elector count system to make the next emperor. Is he didn't take a person. He didn't have direct descendants.
Okay, I gotta pause right there. I know this is one on halflings, and we can dig on this more. I'll just say I do find that fascinating of a lineage not having to be blood, because insert rant here about the whole thing, like within our world of, oh, you have to have royal blood. I'm
No,
like, fuck off. That's how you get fucking genetic problems. But I know I find that idea, and we'll dig into when we dig more into him. I just that already that idea. I'm like, ooh, that's fascinating that you have royalty not by blood.
I
But yeah, so allegedly had
yeah.
sex with Sigmar, but there's no proof
So
of it.
emperors are
But go
elected.
on.
That's like rule number one. Emperors are elected.
So you can
Yes,
literally go, I didn't
you
vote
can
for
literally go ahead
you.
and vote for you, and then try to undermine them the entire time that they're there. Um, it is believed that halflings migrated with ogres over the world's edge mountains about 200 years after Sigmar left. Um, and second, there's a big gap because the next thing that really comes up is that it is agreed that their homeland should be a place called the Moot in the western section of the empire. And how this was created is a big joke.
The quick pause just for geography reference. So you said the West. So the equivalent in our world
Um,
of what country?
Transylvania.
Give or take. Okay,
So
go on.
remember how I said this is a big joke? Ooh.
Right, but it's still okay. That part, the kind of near the Mediterranean, but not the
Yeah, yeah,
Mediterranean.
yeah.
Got it.
So they decided to found this because it would be a big joke. Um, I'm getting our map up for you so you can see it on the map to help you out a little
Yeah, I
bit
think
here.
that
Let
will.
me get that set up for you and ding. So here's where the vampires live.
Wait. 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 I'm going to ask this stupid question. The
Yes!
vampires
As
exist
a
in
matter of
Warhammer.
fact, Romeo and Juliet in Warhammer are Isabella and Manfred von Karstein, the vampire couple of eternal love and betrayal.
I was going to say that sounds like a joke, but I'm like, ooh, that's
Yeah,
really
so they live
poetic when you think
here,
about it. But
and the halflings live right about here.
yep.
And
Okay.
the reason the halflings live there is a big giant joke at the expense of
Mm-hmm.
Stirland. Stirland being over here where you see Averheim. And the reason why is fuck Stirland. Stirland sucks. Anyone who argues with me, no. If you show up with an army painted up in Stirland colors for a Warhammer Fantasy game with me, I will make it my personal mission to annihilate your army to the man and completely table you, ignoring all objectives.
Okay. So first, I'm assuming terms because again, I have the most basic. I'm assuming tabling someone is the
Tabling
equivalent of
someone
just
means
wiping
that
the floor
at
with
the
them.
end, before the end of the last round of, because usually you do 4 or 5 rounds depending on the edition and the rules and the rules of the tournament. You do 4 or 5 rounds of combat. At the before the end of the last round, all of their miniatures are removed from play.
Oh, okay.
Sterling
Gotcha.
sucks. We're gonna
I'm
go
assuming
more
in the
into
future
why
we'll go more
Sterling
into
sucks
why they
later.
do. I'm not arguing.
When we get everybody's kind of racial overview, we might dive in. We're definitely gonna dive in and talk about like individual clans and sections and particularly notable characters and where you can read the information about those people. But yeah, Sterling
Okay.
sucks. Um, it might also go ahead.
And Sterling
Mm.
is a clan, not a
Sterling is a
race.
province of the empire. Okay.
Got
It
it.
might
Go on.
also have to do with the fact that Ludwig the Fat, the current emperor at the time, had a quick-witted halfling gesture of unknown name and or origin, who suggested taking away some of Sterling's land to give the halflings a homeland. And between this joke and the various connections
I'll-
of that jester, he made it where it happened.
And also, just before we go further, related to them, in Warhammer, what is the average
Okay.
height for a halfling?
So a halfling, on average, is pretty short. When I say pretty short, okay, so the D&D scale is a pretty good scale. So here's a dwarf at 4 foot to 5 foot. Halfling's down here. Halfling head at human crotch level. That's about correct.
So many jokes. I'm just gonna say you can make so many jokes with that.
So now, for the brief stupidity of the halflings, if you're starting to see a pattern here, they invented pie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not the mathematical concept, the pastry.
Which would have been hilarious.
And,
but yes, the pastry. Now, and also, just for brief, are we talking British meat pies
both.
or American fruit pie?
Now, the husband of this invention, because it was a husband and wife duo who invented this, wanted to call it a piper because of the way it piped out steam. The wife wanted to call it a pie.
Yeah, I can see that.
This started a war and a divorce.
I like how the war goes first.
This was called the First Pie War. Note I said the First Pie War. Yes? Are you okay?
I'm great. This is hilarious. I love it. Keep going. How many pie wars have there been?
Oh, we're going to get there.
Oh, boy.
The truce the truce at the end of the First Pie War, which lasted 23 years.
Which is short in Warhammer years.
It's short in Warhammer years, but you have to remember that's really fast in Halfling years, because it only takes 8 years for a Halfling to reach maturity. That means that this war lasted 3 Halfling generations.
Oh, fuck.
But the truce didn't decide which word was correct. It was decided by popular use, because a piper was already considered a professional bard, and pie was a new word, so they used the word pie.
Mm-hmm.
It took, after they had a homeland, another 152 years for Halflings to be considered citizens, and the end of the First Pie War. So, remember the First Pie War? After they got citizens, so they've gotten citizenship now. And a man named Well Berteblaus and his family invented a form of topless pie that they tried to call a tart.
That's not how tarts work, but
this resulted in an 18-year-long war called the Second Pie War.
Hey, they're getting better. They're getting more efficient at the war. But let me guess, the Third Pie War is 10 years or something like that.
Oh, boy. After this ended, there was a ruling body established to rule pastry disputes and determine on what condition by which you had invented both a new pastry and what it should be called. And this council was only put into position under the conditions that another bloody war did not spark. Another bloody war would spark. The Third Pie War killed 500,000 people.
When's the wholesome part coming?
We're getting there. There's gonna be a ride. The Third Pie War.
Now, okay. Is there, without jumping too much ahead, did they ever have a war over cheesecake?
That's why the Third Pie War is over, because they wanted to classify cheesecake as pie.
I'm going to admit this. The first two were silly, but I'm like, you know what? There's enough rationale with cheesecake that I'm like, yeah, I could see a war in this world coming over this.
Ogre mercenaries got involved. In order to break up the rampaging ogre mercenaries, human imperial state troops were sent. And they got involved so deeply that it laid the foundation the very foundations to undermine the Empire 1700 years later when Grom the Paunch would show up and turn Altdorf into his personal racetrack during his Wa. All of these Pie
Okay.
Wars resulted in a total of 4, count them 4, great grudges from the dwarves.
Wait, how did the dwarves get
Because they're right
involved
next to
in
the
this?
halflings.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Because if you look on the
Now,
map,
did
if
the
you look
dwarves
on the map here, here's Zufbar, here's the dwarf capital, here's the halflings. They're right next door to each other. And here's another dwarf clan, and this dwarf and I want to emphasize this. The Third Pie War is the reason why the vampire counts were able to burn Bugman's brewery, which is like the most sacred alcohol ever to the dwarves.
Oh, fuck. Now, okay, now, so, so, is there a record then when the first Pie War was a civil war? So was it second or third? Which Pie War do they start bringing in more people that aren't halflings?
The Third Pie War is when they started bringing in ogre mercenaries, and they had sent in Imperial state troops. The dwarves got involved. It was a mess.
Now, is there record of, for example, what side the orcs picked and what side the dwarves?
The
went
orcs
on,
don't show up till like 1,000 years later, but because of the events of the Third Pie War, it laid the foundation for why the orcs were allowed to rampage the way they did without actual interference. Because of all the legal ramifications of the war and how the elector counts had to be shifted around, and the actual like constitution and charter of rights of how the empire works had to be changed to prevent another Pie War.
Which I have a bad feeling did not prevent another Pie War.
Strangely, the Third Pie War was the last one. Now,
okay,
the halflings go relatively quiet for 300 years. Because they're fighting the largest scathing uprising in recorded history. Halfling.
And quick refresher.
Go ahead.
Quick refresher with the Skavelings?
Skaven. The Rat Men.
I'm trying to remember who those. Oh yes,
the Rat Men. So you know these guys that we're gonna have a whole episode on because they're fun. So the Skaven are having the biggest like undercity uprising in the Moot ever recorded, and the Halflings take their outriders to Altdorf, the imperial capital, and talk to an emperor. And I want you to listen to this emperor's name, Boris the Incompetent.
I'm having to pause because, first of all, that someone got that name, but why is then that person even in some kind of position with that name?
Because in order to impeach an imperial emperor from power, every elector count must vote to impeach. Otherwise, you have a civil war and deal with it, and you just wait till he dies. Anyway, Boris the Incompetent, instead of dealing with the Skaven problem, declared all mentions of Skaven to be treasonous and heretical, a law that remains in place to this day. It's why Skaven don't exist.
Okay, I was literally, that was going to be my next question.
Which it gets way worse, because Boris's action will result in Stirland abandoning the halflings because of the Skaven, and the dwarves refusing halfling refugees because of the grudges from the Pie Wars. I want to make a joke here about this race just having bad luck, but man, I can't. It's just like, wow, you guys had great luck and then terrible.
Well, but that also, but at the same time, is like, you also made your own bad luck. You decided to have a war over pie.
And now, side tangent, Boris is also the reason why we have witch hunters, why mages are required to specialize in magic and restricted to certain winds of magic based on what their specialization is, even though he was bribed by people who were super superstitious about mages to make both the witch hunters and to restrict them in this way, and it does not help at all prevent mages from having chaos taint or summoning a demon. He was led to believe these things. It's why we have the different. It's why there's like 12 different mage colleges, and like you pick one, and that's the magic you can use for the rest of your life. And the reason for this is because it was found out that taxes that were being collected was not working properly, to the point that the corruption in the tax economy was so bad, tax collectors had more money than the elector counts.
Because we haven't gone over it, just quickly summarize what elector counts
So
are.
you see how each on the map here, you see how like you have like each of these little cities here have a name. So an elector count is basically the noble who runs that city.
So like a mayor, for lack of
So
a
like a
better
mayor,
term.
but more like a governor of a city state.
Okay, gotcha,
So
gotcha.
the tax collectors, the people who are supposed to be gathering the money, have more money than the people who are in charge, because the corruption is that bad. And instead of dealing with this total bureaucratic fuck up, he decided to tax the nobility.
Because yes, you should tax the nobility, but go on.
He issued a 1 shilling tax for every peasant that each noble had. The elector counts, not having any real recourse to deal with this, for the first time in the history of the empire, decided that peasants would no longer be tax-free. So peasants lost their tax-free status and now have to provide a soldier from each family name, expected to produce a minimum of 2 male soldiers for the empire, and these are draftees for life. Later, this was changed to 1 male and 1 male or female soldier, but you still have to send 2 of your kids off to the military for the rest of their lives.
All because a bunch of nobles didn't want to pay taxes.
Because a bunch of nobles didn't want to pay taxes, because a bunch of halflings showed up and were screaming about rat men.
This screams Reaganomics, and fuck Reaganomics.
It is. The part of the original writing of this setting was to make fun of some of our modern politics. This is making fun of them. Anyway.
Oh yeah, yes, go on, because
halflings, y'all. By the way, we're supported by patrons. Go drop $1. Every person who drops $1, awesome. We need 6 more people to show up to my Patreon and be like, here's $1. And we will have custom artwork for every episode. That's it. It's $6. It is 6 of you going, yes, I want this. Now,
yeah, get one. But also, though, related, didn't you say there's another goal? If you get a certain amount, then we're going to start making posters.
Yes, if we hit 25 $1 patrons, we will start making posters. 25 new patrons, I should say. We only need 19 more, and we'll start making posters specifically for this. In the meantime, Ginger, what is your shut up and take my money this week?
Okay, shut up and take my money. I got a bunch to pick from. Mine, you start, and then I'll do mine this time.
Okay, so my shut up and take my money came up in the car on the way home today, which is why I was late, and I'm sorry for that. And it's very simple. If I want to know the legislation and lawsuits of a company, I should just be able to like contact the state and just get a legal history record for that company. Even ones that are technically sealed, I should at least know what the initial complaint was, because you can get that even though the legal records are sealed. So I should be allowed to do that. And there's no way to do that. There's no way to just go, hey, I want all of the known I want to know the names of all of the known legal filings, for instance, for Wizards of the Coast from 1992 to 1995, for reasons possibly involving the Magic Reserve list.
Oh, it's a Magic the Gathering player. And then I know you've told me like how you hated the game. I actually enjoyed and played it in college.
But yeah. So like,
yeah.
as a person who does journalistic work, I should just be able to request the names of all the legal filings and get them, and then pick the ones I want to specifically ask for the depositions for and pay for those. But you can't do that. And I'm like, why is the legal system not set up to be able to just be like, hey, I need all of this, and then figure out which ones you actually need and pay for the ones you need to be sent to you in full? It's just annoying. Anyway, what's your shut up and take my money?
My shut up and take my money. It's almost not a similar vein, but similar energy. I would like just to have satellite or cable, whichever you pick, be a la carte experience. I once had a friend explain to me how the reason why it's affordable, all of this, and my friend was very smart and he had a good point. But I'm like, your point is valid, but it's a stupid point, not because you're stupid. That's how that the system convinces us. I'm like, no, I don't need ESPN3. I don't need all these stupid channels. I just want that's why I like in theory. Yes, we can talk about how poor and like stupid and how like divided it has gone with all these streaming services, but I like the concept where I'm like, all right, I just want to pay for, i.e. Crunchyroll. I just want my anime. That I like. I like the idea. I'm willing to pay I'm willing to pay the little bit of a premium to get the focused content.
And see, the problem is they want to hand you a bunch of extra content that they just happen to make for a niche audience, as you're paying for it so it can keep being made for the niche audience. And I'm just like, no. And at this point, a lot of streaming services have almost become like cable packages. I'm looking at you, Disney Plus, Hulu, and whatever else is attached to you at this point. That looks like an unholy amalgamation of chaos spawns have more coherency than you.
And I will add a follow up to all of that. What an actual shut up and take my money. I've been seeing the meme going around and I wanted to keep continuing. So, for those who don't know, Disney owns the rights to the Muppets. Jim Henson wanted at some point just got tired of being associated with the Muppets. There's a whole documentary on it, but he still wanted the legacy preserved. So he figured Disney was the one to do it. And he had a point. If you want to find a corporation that will go after you for trying to use someone else's copyright, Disney's really fucking good at it. But Disney owns, there was a whole court proceeding. He did it willingly. There was no one to a gun in his head. He wanted to do it. So Disney owns the rights to the Muppets. Because I do not give, I hate the fact that Disney's trying to do, live action of these classics. No, the only one I was somewhat excited for was Mulan, because I'm like, okay, out of all of these live action remakes, this is the one that could have the potential to be it, and it was just as bad as all the others. Someone did the great example was the Muppets version of Beauty and the Beast. And I just read the description. I'm like, fuck yes, I want this.
That's fair.
Okay. So enough of shut up and take my money. Let's get back to Halflings because I want to know more than just the Pie War.
Okay, so you want to know more than the Pie War. We're getting there. So we're going to get into this. Now, after all of this has happened, we've had the Pie Wars, we've had Halfling exile from the homeland that was created for them by a literal emperor whose name was the Fat, and was now lost by an emperor whose name was the Incompetent. We're going to talk about how Miss Buttermilk Codlywurst, that is her name. Buttermilk Codlywurst.
Do all of the halflings have these weird
Halflings almost uniformly are named after food
or have these weird long, like they sound like, I feel like every time I hear these names I suddenly have the urge to wear lederhosen and I don't know why.
She returned from the Chaos Waste and may have been the first and only halfling ever recorded to be slightly mutated.
Okay, what's her mutation?
She had some scaly fingernails.
That's not bad on the scale of and just fingernails, not
just
even
fingernails.
Toenails. Just
toenails
fingernails.
were fine.
On the scale of what you've told me about mutations, she kind of got she got a pretty good.
Well, halflings can't use magic and are extremely resistant to just about everything. But she decided she would come up with a fluffy pastry with fruit and custard and called it a Norskin. The Council of Pastries debated this name for 3 decades, and after Miss Codlywurst was long since dead, finally agreed that the name the Norskin was appropriate after several duels to the death over other potential names were ignored.
So, what is the Norskin equivalent in our world?
The Norskin equivalent in our world is a fruit jello pie. So it's where you have a pie crust, but instead of hot, you put cold jello in it and cover it with
Huh.
whipped cream and custard.
God, oh my God! I'm picturing in the shenanigans because now of all. See, this isn't my usual like shenanigans where I made fun of like, oh, the ones that got chased out by the sea elves and the putting on the Hawaiian shirts because that's me going into silly mode. No, 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 no. The halflings are literally that my every time I go into silly mode with this idea, but it's actual lore.
Yeah, I told you they were one big joke, and very wholesome at that for Warhammer anyway.
Yeah, wholesome. I think you needed to preface it because if you just said wholesome in a vacuum, I'm like no. But if you said wholesome for Warhammer, I'm like yeah, no, that
So
tracks.
during the three-way Imperial Civil War over who was going to be the next emperor, the Halfling Elector Count said, "Nope, I'm not voting for anybody. Bye," and withdrew them from the court until such a time as, and I quote, "the Bigfoots settle their political mess."
Nice.
Um, and then during the ensuing Greenskin invasion, the Halflings retreated to the Moot and gained a reputation for soft living, being unreliable allies, and general cowardice.
Because they're just like, I just want to go, I just want to chill in my cottage and make pie.
Later, because of a shortage of meat, of proper pie for meat pies, during this
Hmm.
time of withdrawal, they invented a sausage roll and refused to give it a name, and it became a symbol of bad times and horrible foods. They literally invented the same kind of sausage roll that the Brits call frog in a blanket and labeled it as the worst food you could ever serve me.
Is it a hot dog?
No, no, you don't know what frogs. Oh, hold on. This is what frogs in a blanket looks like, and oh, excuse me, toad in a hole. It's called toad in a
Oh,
hole.
total. Okay, that's something
Yeah,
different.
yeah,
Okay,
and
that's
I've had it, and it's god awful.
it. Look like sausage by itself can be good. It looks like
This is an unspicy, mostly flavorless sausage that's only preserved with like pepper and garlic. And the bread is more like bread pudding. It is the texture is off-putting, the flavor is bland. There's no redeeming qualities with this meal.
this looks like a TikTok
Yeah,
recipe
but
and a bad
it's a
one.
normal thing that that people in Britain eat, and it's atrocious. And halflings consider it the worst thing in the world you could ever serve them.
I'm like, the more you tell me about this race, for the most part, I'm starting to like them.
Then came the warpstone.
Oh boy, here we go.
So warpstone is this general green substance that is highly radioactive that people like Skaven use for currency and magic powers and to power their technology, like miniguns. Don't worry about the radiation part, Mr. Gunner. You're only going to live to be 10.
If you're
What's a
lucky.
little, magical cancer? Yeah, they literally use warpstone coins as their currency instead of gold.
It's the equivalent of us using plutonium rods as
A
currency.
warpstone comet slammed into Sylvania, which on the map here you see this like little jagged piece here that's kind of brown that sticks up.
Hmm.
That's where the comet hit.
Is it just me, or maybe I'm getting my geography wrong? It seems kind of close to where Ukraine is.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit,
A little bit.
almost like Chernobyl-ish.
Yeah, right.
And it is believed to have been summoned by the Skaven themselves.
So they're the ones who, goddamn, what's the number that's there's a specific button in Chernobyl that is pressed that caused the thing to finally go
Yes,
kaboom.
yes.
They did the equivalent of that. They're like, yes, we want this to go boom. So that they summoned the radioactive
They're the
comet.
ones that pressed AZ5. They're the ones that pressed AZ5,
There
and
we
it was over. Um,
go.
so they summon this comet, and now halflings go there and collect warpstone pieces that go on their family mantles to show as symbols of wealth and courage. Halflings, by the way, are people who live in family longhouses like Native Americans in the north, in the Atlantic North and the Pacific Northwest lived, where you have these big houses where the whole family lives, and the extended family and the extended family, that they live like that.
And to make sure I'm getting, because I want to make sure I have my mental image. I'm thinking about the ones that are like made in, for lack of a better term, cliff faces, and they're kind of like, or is that closer to what,
They
or what are your?
so they don't halflings don't build them into cliff faces. They build them one of two ways. They either build them this way where they're out in the open, or
Mm-hmm.
they build them into dirt hillsides. And
Okay,
poor
okay, that style,
poor
gotcha.
halfling families, families without money, will build them out of dirt with no wood, and they will build a dirt house. And if you don't believe that people would build dirt houses on the prairies of the United States, where there was no real building material, we built these things called sod houses that are literally just dirt and stone and a little bit of wood here and there, but it's it
Yeah.
probably won't collapse on you. Probably. But the poorer halflings live in what we would call a sod house.
Now, I don't. You mentioned the detail because we were going on the house. You mentioned, so they'll display the radioactive rods. Now, do halflings have any radioactive
Yes, they're
resistance?
extremely resistant to chaos corruption, but they are obviously not resistant to Skaven stabbing them.
Okay. Well, no, no. Just oh, they actually do have legit
Yes,
radio.
that's why one of them went to the Chaos Wastes and came back and was like, I got some weird fingernails now, but other than that, I'm fine. Um, but yeah, it doesn't prevent Skaven from stabbing them repeatedly,
Right.
and has made them excellent targets for Skaven, because it's like every Skaven knows that every Halfling family house will have pieces of raw warpstone in them that could make you rich. So while they're dealing with all of that repercussion, the vampire counts came and found that halflings are resistant to vampirism and taste bad.
Oh my God. Hell yes.
Ogres also think they taste bad, and ogres who will literally eat anything, including people, won't eat halflings because they taste bad.
Not gonna lie, so far I'm like, okay, if it's one of those,
Mm.
you get to pick in, like, you have to live this. Like, so far, halflings, if you know it right, seem to have gone off pretty well for the most part. Obviously those
Now,
wars, but
I
again, this
couldn't
is
find a
Warhammer.
ton of records about this part, but apparently, when the vampire counts began attacking the Empire from Sylvania, they tried to attack. They tried to go around the halflings because they tasted bad and attack Stirland. And the halflings said, "Oh hell no!" And for the first time after 500 years of mostly, withdrawing during turbulent political times, the halflings rallied an army and beat the living snot out of the vampire counts and their undead hordes.
Yes, I have this image though of your typical tall vampires getting the shit beat out of them by these 3 foot tall halflings, and I
That is
love it.
exactly right. And it gets even crazier. Manfred von
Go on.
Karstein was so completely repulsed and beaten by the halflings that not only did he go north to attack Osterland instead of the halflings, that he could not claim a single victory in battle against halflings.
Nice.
And it gets even more hilarious because apparently, speaking about a halfling in the presence of a von Karstein vampire of any of their descending lineage may result in them going into a blind murder rage against you just for referencing a halfling.
Like, I'm just picturing you're a human or whatever, and you're chilling with a vampire for some reason, and they're not trying to bite you, and you're like, "Hey, would you like some pie?" And then the vampire just goes total sicko mode.
Now, the vampire invasion did take something away from the halflings, and I need you to understand that this is absolutely devastating to halflings to have to deal with.
Oh boy. Okay, what?
Because the primary ingredient for the creation of flan, yes, the dessert pastry,
Mm-hmm.
is from Sylvania, the Empire declared it illegal and heretical. Halflings continued to make it. The dessert has been declared such a heresy that witch hunters and imperial authorities who find you in possession of flan in any way, shape, and form, including recently having consumed it, i.e., they can make you throw it up and say, "No, that's flan," have the right to arrest, torture, and execute you, regardless if you intended to distribute, consume, or were merely transporting it, even if you were transporting it and were unaware it was in your possession.
This is the complete opposite of last week's discussion. I love these halflings because while they stand up for silliness, but it's almost because it's so, but you can almost see the like not honor, but you can see the like love in it because as someone who cooks and bakes a lot, fighting for something that you can make food wise to me is like the most like awesome thing you can do.
Nobles and elector counts alike have to resort to negotiating with the Halfling Flan Underground Railroad. And there's a group of witch hunters who are dedicated in the moot strictly to hunting out illegal flan dens.
Are they like speakeasies?
Yes!
Now I'm picturing a bunch of halflings playing jazz music. People are eating flan, and you know you got to say the passcode.
And
to
then the
get
witch
in.
hunters burst in, and they goes, "No one expects the Inquisition."
Oh my
So what
god!
do you think so far?
Oh my god! I love them. Why is there only one book on
There's not even a book
these people?
on them. It's just a book they happen to be in. Otherwise, it's just like the role playing tabletop books have them, but they don't have like a specific book just for halflings. I don't think I couldn't find one. At least going through up to third edition. I don't know if they made one for fourth. That's just like here's the halflings. Um, they don't have their own army book. They used to have it like a sub army, but like there's so much just like coolness to them, and they're just like no.
So you couldn't, at least up to the edition you have. I couldn't, even if I had the money, I couldn't make an entire Warhammer army of
You actually could.
halflings.
You could make an entire army of Warhammer halflings, but it comes with a caveat that you would either be playing by legacy rules, or you would have to get someone to make a custom rule set, or you would be proxying the army as something else.
Boo.
So
I would. If you had, there could be, you could have so much meme potential already with it. Like, I'm picturing your because again I'm familiarish with miniatures. You have your halflings, and they're all when you're painting your miniature, you're then painting the little pie they hold in their hand.
yeah, no, I get that one. So
Yeah, I think you can.
it's time for fake sponsorships because we're not sponsored. We're not sponsored by anybody, but we do have this week. We have something you might be interested in.
Oh, what?
So have you ever had a major conglomerate that's recently fucked up horrifically badly, involving, infringing on their players' right to creativity and genuinely screwing their franchise out of their 25-year dominance of a tabletop of a genre of gaming, come up to
I might
you
have even
and
I might even have made a video on
come
that.
up to you and want to hand you money to say something nice about their new edition. Well,
Go off.
welcome to Beards and Belts. We're here to sponsor you to talk about playing Beards and Belts 6th edition. I mean 1. It's Beards and Belts 1. It's totally not 6th edition, we swear.
It's totally like Mortal Kombat where they're just restarting the name again. It's just a fresh start. It's a soft reboot, everybody. It's just a soft
Yeah, it's
reboot.
just a soft reboot. It's just a soft reboot. It's not like we didn't, we assure you 100% that we're going to use AI generation instead of real artists and writers to make this, and we're going to do it based on totally the adventures of other people that we never paid a dime for, put into a machine to churn out stuff.
I have things to say, but I'm now. You got any more about that sponsor fee?
And by the way, my name is C. Cox. I'm dead serious. That's the name of the Hasbro CEO, Chris Cox. On his executive door is the words C. Cox. This joke writes itself. Anyway.
So my sponsor this week, B. I know you're really good at computers. You even told me that at some point you could have learned the coding that almost all airlines decide to still use, even though the code's decades old and makes it so like dealing with dealing with modern tech problems with coding, even regardless of what happened on Friday, is still an absolute pain. You know how good you are at that?
Yeah.
Well, I know you work so much and you would like to not waste your time coding. How would you like to make a VPN? How would you like to have your own, to use a VPN because you're too lazy to code your own?
That sounds like you're going to ask me to pay money now.
Yep, you're going to pay money to use a VPN because you want to watch Netflix that for some reason, because people are stupid, all these major companies are stupid and be like, oh, we all know that the main reason you're using a VPN, you don't want your privacy. You just want to watch, insert show from another country, even though you're paying for it. But guess what? Just because you think you're being protected, actually, they're actually giving you, it'll give all that data that you're protecting. It's just another group of people that will protect it for you at an extra cost.
Are they totally going to sell me out and sell my data right up the river the moment any government agency asks about me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, lovely. This sounds like a service I should totally buy into.
Oh, yeah. NVPN. Nothing to be worried about here.
We're never getting sponsored.
Oh, we're never getting sponsored. Or it will be a sponsor who's like, no, go for it. That would be hilarious. So, but
if they say no, go for
serious?
it, I'm going to go take notes from the internet historian about his sponsorships and how he does them and be like, okay, get ready.
Oh, yeah. Or we're going to go totally weird. Like, how clever. But you mentioned, did legitimately Hasbro try to say, hey, say something nice about us?
They have paid hundreds of YouTubers to say something nice and give early access to D&D 1.
You're serious? They're calling it D&D 1.
That's what they called it.
It's
a subscription service, by the way. You can't just buy the books.
Fuck off, Hasbro. Fuck off.
Anyway.
Yeah, you can still buy, just because it's been a bit since I bought, you can still buy Pathfinder books, right?
Yeah. You can still buy Pathfinder, 1st and 2nd edition, on PDF or hard copies.
Yeah. The subscription model, I'm like, there are some things I'm like, I'll do a subscription for, because I'm like, okay, like, there's a company called Sound Gym, not sponsored, but they're basically for helping, people develop their sound mixing skills. I'm like, okay, that makes sense as a subscription, like a gym membership. But I'm like, no, a piece of hardware or software, I'm not going to do a goddamn subscription for. No, thank you.
Okay, but before we wrap up, totally, totally real sponsors. I'm going to read a quote from Mr. C. Cox himself to his board of directors and his investors that he then repeated at PAX West to a public audience. First off, we're doing R&D efforts around AI. D&D has 50 years of content that we can mine, literally thousands of adventures we've created, probably tens of millions of words we own and can leverage. Direct quote.
Do the people? Do the people? I swear, like, do the people who
Hey,
and like even in the few scenarios where AI does create something, you still need an editor to like fix the problems. But also, secondly, it's like everything that AI makes almost, I will admit, 0.01% of the time AI does make something interesting, but it does not. But unfortunately, 99.99% of the time, AI, especially with writing, like you always have to correct it. I'm just like, do they think? I think
the,
right
the,
now AI is this buzzword
yeah.
that like out of touch CEOs somehow think are going to solve everything. It's not going to solve
No, no,
every
no, no.
anything
It's
at
it's it's
all.
it's out of touch executives who are just looking at ways they can cut more jobs.
Oh yeah. And it's one of those like it will come back to bite them. They'll cut the jobs, and it's like it's in without getting into a huge long rant. I've been seeing this in the video game industry where they keep like Microsoft and all these other companies where they'll buy up all these companies and then fire everyone, but it makes the quarter look good. It's like that's great now for this quarter, but a couple of years from now, Call of Duty 22 is not going to help you. You need to have all
Yeah.
those small little indie games. Oh wait, because you now fired them, they either you've lost that you've lost that job pool, or the ones that were able to then they've made the next Baldur's Gate 3 or whatever.
Okay. So before just off on this tangent before we jump back in and talk about Halfling Society, um, it turns out that like this has happened before with games like World of Warcraft and EVE Online, games that have run for like 10 years as a live service model type deal. You can see what's happened.
Hmm.
EVE Online once had the ability, you couldn't do anything with it yet because it was in an alpha kind of state, but it was released so players could test it to do so. You could dock your ship and step out and walk around. The character models were absolutely, especially for an MMO, drop dead gorgeous, and you could walk around. You could customize this little area for your character. You could sit down. The idea was to one day have it where you could get out and walk around and do stuff outside your ship, but also be able to like interact with people in a setting where you're not all sitting in a ship and therefore worried about being vulnerable. And you could like actually go down and do stuff out of the ship like combat and things of that nature. But that was long down the line. Well, the problem was, um, since this was an experimental branch, when it came time to cut costs, they cut half the developers for that particular branch, which slowed down what they were doing exponentially. And then something horrible happened. The lead dev who understood how all of that code worked died. You can't go rehire the people who might be able to piece the entire thing together now because you only have half the staff who understand half of what's going on, and the other half you fired. And the person who understood everything is gone. And then on top
Yeah,
of that, 20 to 30% of people who lose their job in the video game industry give up and go do some other
yeah,
tech-based industry like cybersecurity or um, engineer basic software like Excel or the Premiere Pro editing software that I use. They don't keep trying in the video game industry because they keep losing their job. Well,
yeah, and
you're losing whole sections of your ability to make and code things and understand how things work. You're losing experience, and as the U.S. Army will teach you, the one thing we can never replace is experience.
yeah, and there's a quote. Well, this is related to that in Hearts of Iron. No, no, it's not. I don't think it's not from Hearts of Iron. I think it's Sun Tzu's Art of War saying you can always lose, you can always recapture, you can always recapture land, but you cannot not recapture, but you can't get back a person
You
lost.
you you
I admit,
you can make new armor, you can make new swords, but the swordsman who once wielded them that was a master, if he is gone, you can no longer get the master's teaching.
yeah, exactly. And it's kind of to put a little bit, at least a semi-positive spin not on all this. It's a similar, not, it's weird in my industry in the live entertainment when COVID hit. A lot of people then did not return because, unfortunately, while I love my job, I don't love my industry. One of the biggest problems is unless you're really aware of it, like I mentioned to people what I do, but a lot of people who go to a concert don't know that someone actually has set all this stuff up. They just think, oh, because I've had it happen to me constantly. People don't connect what a sound engineer is. They just think a band shows up and sound happens, but someone has to be, push the buttons, push the faders and all that. So there's also that level of people. It's one of those. Did you ever play Half-Life? I think it's 2 episode 1 where it has the it has the developers
Yeah.
commentary. So there's a line one of them says, he lists all the things that they did with the Alex model to make it look realistic, or not realistic, but just to make it look good. And he said he the quote he says is, if we did our job right, you don't notice all the things we just did.
Yeah.
It's a similar thing in my industry. If we're doing our job right, you don't know that we exist. But then that problem then means we are, I don't want to put not a invisible industry. We just, people don't notice us. And there's the other problems is HR does not exist in my industry unless you work for like a really big group or band. There's no HR. So there, see what you will about HR. There's at least someone you can talk to. Not in my industry. Even with unions, as much as I'm a union man, there's problems there. But all of that led to a lot of people when COVID hit. There was a good percentage of my industry of sound engineers who just they left, and then some of the people who stayed were then unfortunately the subpar ones. So, but what that leads to, like, Scott, where's this going? This is going to, at least it made so for me, my job when I applied for the cruise line, because I'm such a specialist skill, I did something I'm a little proud of. I was able to set the date I was going on the ship because I'm such a niche of a niche of a niche. A sound engineer who has all these experiences who can then work on a ship.
Yeah, yeah.
They're like, fine.
You've got to be able to work on a ship, and then when like someone, so like you have a magician on stage at one point, and he needs to be keyed in C major, and then you have a deep voice singer who needs to be keyed in G major. You can't just like press a single button on your sound audio board and it fix the music and the microphone and everything to come out so that that person sounds amazing. You have to adjust.
Yeah.
I've seen my grandfather was the sound engineer at the church he was deacon at. I've seen him, like the difference in what he had to adjust for, like the difference in the choir versus the understudy versus the pastor actually stepping up to talk on a microphone. He makes like he was making 10, 12 adjustments at a time every time somebody changed on the mic, because they all had different requirements for them to sound amazing.
Yeah, this is even something hinting to a topic segment we'll do in future called I happen to be a scientist myself, because I would like to go more into this. But yeah, it's not trying to toot my own horn. It is just such a specialist skill rate within everything. So I have no clue where we went on that, but
Anyway,
let's
halflings are really
let's talk more about
halflings are really focused on food, if you noticed.
yeah, which again, for me as someone who I enjoy food, I enjoy cooking food. So there's kind of this connection I really dig with them on a very personal level. Like, yeah, I made all the jokes last week about dwarves and everything, but like for me, even though I'm a tall person, but all their philosophy, it just seems it's ridiculous. But again, this is Warhammer. But it goes back to, in theory, you're fighting over something very small, but it's also one of those things that it's small, but you're incredible. You can, to quote Mother Teresa, you can do no big things, but you can do small things with great love. And to me, that kind of summarizes, at least with the food aspect, what the halflings fight for.
Yes, and the other thing here I want to highlight is 1 in 2 bakers in the empire is a halfling. half of the people who make baked goods are halflings, and
No surprise
it
there.
it gets we're about to get weirder because I'm marinating the dwarves. The dwarves are my favorite faction. I'm marinating them a little bit here.
I'm not surprised.
There is what is called the imitation grudge.
Okay.
Halflings are so good at brewing that they can in fact determine a recipe mostly by taste, to the point that some professional halfling brewers can drink a glass of wine and tell you which vineyard it came from. Not which county, not which region, the actual field the grapes were grown in.
As cool as that is, and I'm sure it is, that's total wino bullshit. But from a lore standpoint, that's
So the
cool.
halflings secretly made an imitation of Bugman's legendary X7 brew.
I'm guessing this is some legendary like alcohol that people are like you drinking and it feels like you're talking with God or whatever, and insert some amazing thing.
Dwarves are hyper resistant to poison, and Warhammer is one of the worlds that get this correct because dwarven food, when it's being served to non-dwarves, is very bland. But because they're not sure what other races can tolerate. But when dwarves are eating it, they straight up put like nightshade in their sausage.
Nightshade is
The extremely poisonous flower that's known for assassinations throughout all of Europe.
well, okay. We'll go more into that when we go to dwarves because I want this to stay focused on
But
halflings.
Bugman's brew is a legendary brew that dwarves will pay twice its weight in gold. So if you put a 20-ounce or a 20-gallon keg of Bugman's brew onto a scale, a dwarf will put 400 gold pieces on the counter scale to buy that one case of Bugman's. The halflings made an imitation of this.
Did they call it like
No,
off-brand?
they tried to pass
Bugman?
it as the real thing, and the only people who could tell the difference were the dwarves.
Mm.
So, you know, it is such a horrendous thing that Zufbar, this little dwarven kingdom that's like right here, that's like right next to the halflings, has banned halflings from entry. Period. You can't come in. And many halflings seeking refuge from various monsters, orcs, skaven, or vampires, have been shut outside the gates and made to get absolutely slaughtered outside the gates because they are banned from entry due to this.
Mm. Now on that again, this is digging so much into details. Was it an ego thing where they're like, where they couldn't even think, oh, we should say, because this is my brain going. I'm like, well, if we can make one that's as great as this, we would just do the, like play
No,
a,
no,
a
no.
marketing
It
game
was
of
the
like, well,
fact they tried to pass it off as the real thing. Had nothing to do with ego or pride or anything. It was you tried to pass this off as the real thing.
right? No. I'm talking from the halfling
Oh, from
side
the
of like,
halfling side, they thought they could play. They thought it would be a good practical joke.
okay. Again, that tracks with this race.
Um, Now, every single halfling since Ludwig the Fat, the man who earlier I told you granted them the Moot as their homeland, every single halfling is able to trace their family lineage all the way back, at minimum, by their head to Ludwig the Fat, i.e., to someone who worked in his court.
Oh, okay, that makes because I was like, wait a second, we're going Vlad the
So,
Impaler here.
in their head they can trace their lineage all the way back to someone who worked in his court. Further,
Okay,
which is about 1500 years. Further, there's a singular scroll that every single halfling ever born has to have their name inscribed on to determine their lineage. And they use this scroll to prevent incest.
good. I like this thing. I like it a lot.
So they can literally like just it's not like this little like you think like 2.5 to 3 foot tall person. They have this little scroll that like you can roll up with two. No, no. Halflings have made this scroll so large and encompassing that the capital of the moot, the wallpaper on the inside is just the lineage scroll wrapping around the inside.
Nice.
And it can be rolled up and moved if they need to move it.
How big is it if you roll it up?
It weighs several horses of paper. That's all it says. It weighs several horses.
So can we estimate it weighs, let's just
3 or 4 tons.
Okay, that's still pretty impressive for just straight up paper.
And it is such a literary complete document that dwarves won't admit it. But the elves swallowed their pride one day and said the halflings might have the most complete historical record of the world because of this scroll in one place.
Cool.
Ogres not only don't eat them because they taste bad, but because halflings actually know how to like communicate to ogres in ways that humans simply don't quite know, whether it be the words used or the body language or something. Halflings make excellent supervisors and foremans for ogres. They also make excellent unionization agitators for ogres to make sure ogres are being treated fairly.
Okay, the more and more you tell me about the halflings fee, the more they're becoming my favorite.
The greatest feat of all time was for a halfling to get an ogre off of a trial for murder on grounds that the human noble he accidentally stepped on was too short for the ogre to physically be able to see, and it's the human noble's fault he got stepped on.
Nice.
Halflings are also extremely superstitious and because of this extreme superstition, they refuse to have any formal priests or temples. Instead, they have temporary priests and have shrines that are open air only, where everyone can see what's going on.
Okay, it's one of those. Without going too deep, I'm like, man, I never realized this. This is someone who is a practicing Christian. I never realized the idea of like, wait, yeah, all churches, whether it be Christianity, Islam,
they
Judaism,
have closed doors. And Halfling said, no, something's wrong with that. No. If you're a priest and you're preaching word of a god, you are doing it in the open. And because of this practice of making it where there's no closed doors and no like actual like temple that has walls and stuff, Halflings have a near zero chaos cult participation. Because if it's behind closed doors, it ain't right.
Which is so progressive and just so fucking righteous. I love it.
They have their own weird esoteric gods. They might worship some of the Empire's gods occasionally, but they do respect, the Empire's gods. But they have their own like list of esoteric gods. That could be its own episode discussing the Halfling gods, because it's very encompassing.
Yeah, this is the complete opposite of chaos gods. I'm assuming these are because there's no chaos. They're the god of, for example, let's just say justice is still the same god of justice.
Now the weird part is magic just happens to them. They don't cause it; it just happens.
And just to confirm, you said they're magic resistant?
Yes. So they just find magic rings. There has been a halfling who went to bed and woke up and tripped over a magic axe that he didn't have the day before. They just find magic weapons lying around, sometimes on the battlefield, sometimes they just appear in their house. No one has an explanation.
Honey, was this sword always here? I wasn't here even she I don't know, I wasn't here this morning.
And because of their complete inability to actually sense magic itself, they don't get like hair raised on their on the back of their neck or on their feet, because they do have hairy feet. They don't have this danger sense in the presence of magic, even when it's directly targeting them.
The opposite of spider sense.
You can literally have a ghost actively haunting a halfling, and he might not notice the ghost in full visual apparition screaming at them.
I'm guessing there's not a lot of. Obviously, this isn't fantasy times, but like, hmm, I don't think in modern times there would be halfling horror movies wouldn't really track
The
well.
halfling horror movies were not tracked very well because the halfling would just be like, "Ooh, pie," and there's just like Jason with a machete misses, and he goes, "The hell."
Yeah, so God, I should make an animation of that. That'd be absolutely
Now,
hilarious. But
I
anyways,
mentioned all of this in order to lead up to this story. Halflings,
okay.
being renowned cooks, are often, when they submit their people for imperial state service, because they're still taxed like everybody else, they have to show up to imperial state service, they're put in as imperial
Hmm.
cooks. They are the army's cooks. The army marches on its stomach, and if you've got a halfling cook, by God, you've got a strong belly.
Yeah.
They are renowned for accuracy with slings and short bows. If they can afford it, they can get a pistol. They can't use a full size handgun, and for some reason, halflings have unerring accuracy with smoothbore pistols to the point they can hit things from ranges that should not be possible.
Yeah, so that was actually going to be a question I had for a bit was, okay, what's their philosophy with warfare?
Halfling
And
snipers scary, yo.
so,
And in every story, halfling is David, and they going up against Goliath every day.
okay, Fee, more and more you tell me about halflings. There's yet to be, I'm sure, one or two things, but the majority of the things you're telling me about halflings, I'm just like, all right, hashtag Team Halfling, let's go. Because
Half
I also most video games I play, if it's a first person shooter, I will gravitate towards the sniper rifle or whatever class uses
Now,
it.
halfling cooks, however, are so proficient in their cooking utensils that they can use any cooking utensil as a lethal weapon, even a rolling pin, and will fight for their kitchen against overwhelming odds. And sometimes kitchen elements can be replaced with magical versions mid combat.
Magical cast iron pan, let's go.
That's what I'm getting to. I'm getting to the cast iron frying pan of doom.
Okay, but before we get to that, I just so now you've told me like certain ones like last week were like so superstitious. So I'm assuming halflings are like if they can afford it and acquire it, they'll use it in
Yes.
warfare.
And the cast iron frying pan of doom comes from where a halfling cook was disarmed and recovered his frying pan mid fight, but he did not realize that his frying pan had been replaced with a magical one. This frying pan went from being a mundane cast iron frying pan to being a solid steel frying pan of doom, able to bypass any form of non magical armor entirely.
And for context, for anyone who has never used a cast iron pan, even a regular in our world, in a regular cast iron pan, you can do damage and potentially kill a motherfucker with one.
He then proceeded to slay orcs 3 times his size with severe blows to their ribs and upper chest that crushed their hearts. And at one point, an unknown orc war boss was hit by this frying pan as a halfling threw it at him and killed him instantly when it caved his head in, breaking up his wah before it could become a major threat.
Now, did you maybe we spaced over it? Did the person who wielded this have the name, or is it just
It
the
does.
story of the
It's
frying
just the story
pan?
of the frying pan. I can't find the dude's name. It's just there's a halfling with a frying pan that kills people.
Now, does that item still exist, or is
Yes,
it just now
it is one of the revered magical items in the hall of the Wizards Academy of Altdorf.
which whereabouts is that in this map? Give or
It's
take.
right here. It's the Imperial capital.
Okay, so not too far from where where
Yes.
they live, so it makes sense it's there.
Further, halflings have a unique form of tank. Yes, I said tank.
Well, dwarves have been able to make armor, which when you mentioned to me the first time, it took me a bit to sink in that dwarves have developed
So
armored zeppelins. I was like, wait, that makes perfect sense. But anyways, yes,
so
half.
Bring it up on screen for you.
Oh my god, I love this. I love everything about
So
this. Oh
The
my
Empire might
goodness.
have the steam tank, which has a front-mounted cannon, and then on top has a rotating turret with a steam cannon. The Halflings took it a
Uh,
step further. So Halfling cook apprentices are required to make a foul-tasting soup. You heard me right. A soup that tastes bad. They have to actually prove that they understand what tastes good by making something that tastes awful.
I can see the theory in that. Go
They
on.
then fill that giant pot behind the tank with this foul tasting substance and bring it to a piping hot boil. Whatever is in this soup, which is a closely guarded halfling trade secret, it boils at 3 times the temperature of water. It is still edible
Okay.
according to the ogres. They then fire it out of the front of that tank cannon as if
No,
using a
okay.
flamethrower or napalm.
Okay, that makes a little bit more sense because I'm like, oh, that's a liquid. You can't, you need it to, yeah, but yeah, that
It
makes sense.
instantly causes third-degree burns and instantly causes infection because of the soup.
Okay. Also, one little detail. I don't know if you can zoom in on the picture anymore. I like how the guy that's no, not the guy with the sword. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What? No, got. Yep. Zoom in on where you have the mouse right now. That's a chef's hat, and I love it.
And I need to emphasize this: halflings aren't just having war crimes; they're inventing all new ones. Because I don't know if there is a code of law in Geneva about spraying your opponent with hot soup.
I'm also. I don't know. Maybe it's just the detail of it. It looks like he has a cigar too.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
I love this race. Oh my god! If I ever played Warhammer tabletop, I'm going to make as within reason. I'm going to put as much halflings as I can as support because I love
Now
it.
there is a single subrace of halflings called the pygmies. This is what they look like. Um, it
Oh, that
is
picture hasn't
it
aged
is
well.
not confirmed if they are actually a subrace or a completely different race altogether. Pygmies of Lustria, who scholars have determined are probably merely dark-skinned halflings, primitive halflings, not only use blowpipes, but also use slings like halflings do, but they don't load the slings with stones. And this took some digging to find out their weaponry choices. But the slings are considered poisonous, and I'm like, why are the slings poisonous? So I had to go digging and digging, and it turns out there's a single mention, not even in the book that mentions pygmies. It's a mention in the book for the Amazon Codex, of all things, that pygmy slings are loaded with poisonous frogs that
Okay.
splatter on impact, and the poison is able to sleep through the skin if it fails to penetrate outright.
Okay. That's Geneva Convention. We need this article is not finished. You can help contribute to it.
There is a
Energy.
fan theory that pygmy villages are centered around frog spawning pools, so that instead of having to go out and hunt and capture them, they just breed the things.
Okay, I can see the logic in
The
that.
poison they create is said to make the eyes boil and blood bleed from everywhere on the body as the skin becomes semi-permeable.
Yeah.
Pygmies use this for war and hunting because once they cook the poison out, it makes the meat super tender. All I
Okay.
have to say
Okay.
is, if you're wandering around Lustria and a frog splatters on a tree, take the hint, turn around and leave.
Yeah, get GTFO.
And that's halflings.
Well, there's a few more questions I've got on it. If you don't, I got
Okay.
some more questions that you. Okay, so we talked about way back in first episode about how in at least most, your typical elf society, there's a very low, almost non-existent unemployment rate. What's that in halfling society?
Halfling society, it varies. Some poorer families may only have one or two people in their entire longhouse at the time who have employment, and some of the richer, more well-off families may only have one person who has employment, but they have such a high degree of income that everyone else doesn't have to work, which is where
Hmm.
halflings get the reputation for being soft-bodied. They don't have to work. They can choose to if they want to, but they don't have to. Um, so
And
it's entire so like unemployment wise or what we would call poverty wise, it's about the imperial average, which is we talked about in the first episode. About 1,700 people have to live in abject poverty for there to be one imperial greatsword.
yeah, though at least from what I can tell, object poverty, at least in halfling society, isn't the
No,
worst.
you're still getting a meal. You're still getting at least one good meal every day. You're still able to stay with your family because you all live in one house. Out to extended like third or fourth cousins will live in the same house with their significant others and all their children.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. There was that
One of the
one.
tasks that an unemployed halfling might be required to do is to extend the house because they need more space because they're expecting babies.
Hmm. So that another thing. Um. How matriarch, patriarch, how balanced would you say, from what you can read, is
Oh, the halflings are
gender?
100% matriarchal. Like every time that it mentions one of their elector counts, except once, it's a woman. Um, every time that a major halfling name is mentioned, it's a woman, or it turns out the woman won the argument at the end, like with the first pie war, where the husband wanted to call it a piper and the wife wanted to call it a pie, and the word pie won out. It seems like it's heavily geared towards being women are in charge in halfling society to some degree. Um,
Which and which makes sense. Seeing this is
like
going to sound.
a typical
Mhm.
one of the reasons for this is a typical halfling longhouse. You may have a halfling baker who goes to work every day, but at the home, the halfling woman is cooking meals for the entire family. Like the head of the household is the woman who's cooking those meals because she has to go down every single family member's personal preferences and make sure that she's made a meal for them.
Which I do find it's the interesting. This is the reverse of what I call the 1950s society, whereas the man went out, at least in America, man went out to work, woman stayed home. But it's interesting how it puts the logical spin on it, where they acknowledge the work that the woman does in this role.
Mm-hmm. And their first elector count was Pulch Ritudius Talltree, referred to as Trudy. And um, oftentimes they refer to people as moot mothered, aka halflings are from the moot land. You're moot mothered
Mm,
rather than moot fathered. Further, like you mentioned earlier, with being your dad is Jewish, but your mom is not, and therefore you're not considered Jewish by Jewish law. Same concept. If your
yeah.
mom's not the halfling and you happen to be a tallfoot, well, you're not considered a part of the halfling family if your mom's not the halfling.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the thing about my heritage where I'm like, yeah, really, that's stupid. But anyway, but interesting comparison for here. So yeah, which you kind of bring up an interesting topic. So I'm guessing, without going into all the deep details, are there any races in the Warhammer world where they're kind of like cool with like mixed race, or is it pretty much you're either pure or you're considered a bastard?
Okay, so Tim says this. Um, with elves, half elves are pretty much they're not welcome in on the Elvish Isles. So if you're if you're a part of Elven society and you're half elf, you're probably over here in the Doomglades or in the Forest of Arnheim with the Elvish expeditions, or you're down here in southern Lustria with the sea elves. You're not in Oath One. But if you're dwarvish, this is important. If you're dwarvish and you have dwarven features, like you have a beard and you're not as tall as a human, or you have dwarven female features in particular, because only 1 in 10 dwarves is born a woman, dwarves have no choice but to accept half dwarves as full dwarves. Under the condition that you agree to marry a full dwarf. Whether you're a man or
Okay.
woman, you agree that if you get married, you're marrying a full dwarf. You're accepted in dwarven society, no questions asked. Humans
And how does?
humans don't care,
Mhm.
generally speaking. In the Empire, the
Yeah,
Empire's a giant melting pot. Bretonia is
yeah,
very
we're mutts.
very human centric and therefore very very much not a melting pot. So the French, uh, Norska, if you're human, cool. If you're a mutant, cool. If you're something else, we're gonna have a problem. And Araby is this weird conglomerate nation whereby they have a
Ooh,
combination. They have slavery, like openly have slavery. It's one of the
wow.
few it's one of the few human nations. I think it's the only human nation that has slavery. The other one being the Dark Elves. But the other flip side of that is you can be a princess of Araby and be an elf.
Hmm.
There's even this dwarven prospectors union out here has relations with Araby that include them being sending half dwarves to Araby who don't want to have to live by dwarven ways, and Araby accepts them as Araby citizens. Which
Are we? I'm assuming we're gonna do we're gonna do particular episodes also on like certain areas as well
we're
because
gonna do episodes on certain areas, but also like certain focuses on certain things, like certain nations, like Araby, like the Empire, Bretonia. Um,
mm,
there's an entire like cluster hell over here where the Dark Elves live in Nagaroth. It is bad. It is. Oh boy! Remember that rogue Tomb
yeah,
King I mentioned? Okay,
yeah,
so all the other Tomb Kings are over here in the desert. This
right.
guy lives in what is the equivalent of the Rocky Mountains.
Ooh. And though to keep this a little focused, because I want that will be interesting back onto the halflings. So then, what is the halfling stance? Because you mentioned words where I'm like, that's kind of hinting at it. But for officially, so if someone is, let's say, just making half elf, half halfling, what is typically their society's belief on that?
If you want to say if you want to go be a halfling, go be a halfling. It's fine. So long as you live by halfling ways and halfling law and agree that the elector count of the moot is your supreme authority, you can go. You're a halfling as far as they're concerned, even if you're tall.
Okay.
That's why that there's a difference between big footer. Those are everyone else, and tall ones. Tall ones are half halflings who just they're not short, but they're accepted as halflings. It's why
So
it's
I'm
why they
assuming.
have ogre mercenaries. It's why they have permanent human settlers. It's why they have outcast dwarves. You can just come live here. It's fine.
I find again for me, I think this is now and more why you say this is the wholesome race of Warhammer because that is a very in a world like Warhammer, that's a very wholesome concept. That is, as long as you follow our beliefs, you are one of us. I just find really cool as well.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So long as you follow our beliefs, you're one of us.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm just trying to. I'm just trying to think of anything. So I'm assuming like they have such a heavy accent on baking. I'm assuming like the Great British Bake Off is the if there was a TV like
if there was
their
a Great
version would
British
happen.
Bake Off for the halflings, it would result in a fourth pie war.
Okay, so then how do they then have some kind of because I feel a society that's so heavily focused
Okay,
on baking. Do they have contests of some form to say, so and so is the best baker or whatever?
no, it is outlawed by the Baking Council for fear it will spark a war.
Okay.
So it's just no. You cannot hold a You cannot hold a food judging con. You can hold a feast, and you can pick who cooks and who doesn't, and that kind of thing. And you can have your opinion on who's the best baker and whatnot. But if you hold a baking contest, everybody getting arrested.
Okay, which yeah, both sides of it, but but then I also find that very interesting.
Like
But then I'm assuming within family dynamics, there's still a pride where even if there is not a contest, if people are like, let's just say, someone has, a child and they become a baker, I'm sure there has to be some pride where like, all
the
everyone in the neighborhood's like, wow,
okay,
your daughter makes a really good
the
pie.
biggest pride that you could be allotted as a baker halfling. There was a great fire in the empire capital of Altdorf in 2431. The end of the setting is in like 2570. So there was a big fire. And at the end of the fire, one of the only things available to eat was the halfling pies of a variety of sorts. The emperor at the time declared it Pie Week. And since then, halflings have taken this very seriously. If you are invited as a baker to Altdorf for Pie Week, it is considered the greatest honor a halfling baker could receive because only 50 bakers are invited for the common folk and 10 for the nobles. So if you're one of the 60 halfling bakers invited for Pie Week, it is one of the greatest honors you can bestow. It's the equivalent of someone of a writer winning a New York bestseller and being able to put that on the front of their book, or someone winning the gold medal at the Olympics.
Okay, that's cool.
And it's not even
Now, and
halfling bakers will nail their imperial invitations to Pie Week every time it has happened for their bakery on the outside of their bakery to prove how good they are.
it's the equivalent of like in art in modern times of just having, a Michelin star
Yeah,
or whatever.
or winning an Oscar really, because halfling bakers are known to triple their prices if they're invited to Pie Week several times.
Now, I'm assuming then Pie Week is like, for example, we have, Hanukkah or Christmas. I'm assuming it's like on their calendars, I guess, as a
It
holiday
is
or
a
something.
it is a halfling international holiday. If it is Pie Week, even if you cannot attend a halfling gathering, it is considered taboo for you to do any work for the entire week other than cooking.
Hey, again, Fee, the more you tell me about like unless like some other like I'm sure I will be interested by elves because I always am or like the vampires, but I'm like, nope, I'm staking right now unless something has overridden it. I am dying on the hill of team halflings. I love this race so much.
Um, and Pie Week is celebrated by the humans in the idea that they'll have pie eating contests and awards for the most unusual pies or the person who made the most. But by the Pie Council, by the High Council for Pastries, they're technically not allowed to give you a ribbon for making the best, just the most.
Oh, okay. Which
But
is
but this
an
comes with a
yeah.
caveat that it's not the person who made the most, it's the person who had the most eaten.
Okay. But again, still it's an interesting way of like when you have to make something to prevent war and you still but again, just fascinating how they're going about it. I really dig
Like
it.
for halflings, any business besides making pies or alcohol comes to a grinding halt during Pie Week.
Then I'm also assuming because they have such obviously it starts with pies in this. I'm assuming just in general, like other forms of food, let's just say, ribs or steak or chicken, whatever, that even if you're not a baker, being a someone who creates food is still considered kind of like how like in American society, if you're a doctor or a lawyer is considered um a job of high prestige. I'm assuming in Halfling society, a baker or a chef or someone who makes food or alcohol is considered kind of a high honor position.
Yes. It's considered a high honor position. It's kind of the thing that like if your family is known for making a particular food, the person who makes that food is the highest ranking member of the family usually. There's like the caveat that's like uh halflings in I think the city of Marienburg, which is this independent city state over here, have basically declared that it is illegal to ask a halfling to work during Pie Week. There's like a lot of just like random little laws that exist in different books that are like, you can't do this if you're a halfling during Pie Week. And I'm like, really? But yeah, they have they are the most wholesome race in Warhammer.
And right now, like I said, they're my favorite race so
That's
far.
good. That's good. Do you want to know what we're going to be talking about next week?
Oh, let me guess,
Orcs.
orcs.
It's orcs. We're
Yep.
going to be talking about the greenskins. And it's if you thought halflings were a joke, everybody, it's going to be a comedy show.
Oh wait, orcs aren't they the one? If I ever have the orcs, they're the ones that are just the meme show. They're the red ones go faster race.
Yes. They're the red ones go faster.
Oh,
They're the our catapult throws goblins at you who have little paper wings attached to them for guidance.
it's going to be the other end of the spectrum, but it's also just going to be equally as fun, I feel.
Okay, let me put it to you this way. This is a normal orc war boss.
Yeah, what I know of orcs even before I met Yuffie, this doesn't surprise me.
It's just like, can he be more spiky?
No, I think he could. He needs maybe some armbands, could put some spikes on there.
Yeah,
He's not, he needs some, yeah, he could get a few more spikes in there.
yeah. This is just a nor. This is even an exceptional. This is just random orc war boss number 200.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're gonna be talking about orcs next week. Anyway,
All right, cool.
thank you all for listening to
Listen
our hour and 45 minutes of rambling about the most wholesome race in Warhammer. Ginger, do you have anything to add for final thoughts before we end?
my final thoughts is I love this race. I love everything about them. And I will probably every other episode, I will not go into further detail. This is the one time where I'm like, no, I want to know more. We've obviously talked so much, but I just love this race so
By the way,
much.
sign-ups for the Warhammer game that's starting in November for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay stuff are in the description, along with the Patreon. Um, and yeah, thank you guys for listening. Good night, everybody.